guys, welcome to Living It Up. Welcome to my happy place, which is the Chennai racetrack. And we are here as a part of Indy Motor Track Days for a very special assignment. Tire testing. I know this looks familiar. This is the MRF Steel Brace, a tire that we guys are quite familiar with. It's their 0 degree steel belt radial tire. It's W rated. But this is a special tire. This is the SP01, which has been specifically designed by MRF for higher capacity sport motorcycles. And this one in particular has been designed for special motorcycle, which is none other than the Suzuki Hayabusa. This right here is a pretty big deal because MRF happens to be the first Indian tire manufacturer to have worked very closely with Suzuki to develop this tire and get their stamp of approval. In fact, we are told that the SP01 is very close to being an OEM fitment, and in the near future we could very well see the Hayabusa rolling out with these tires. So I know, just like me, you have all sorts of questions and all sorts of doubt if the tire is really that good. And we're already off to a good start because we are told by MRF that the SP01 happens to be about 200 grams lighter than the original Bridgestone S22s that the Hayabusa comes short with. So really good start, but how good really is the tire? What better way to really put it to test than the safe confines of a racetrack here at MMRT? So let's go and find out. Yeah, I know a lot of you saw it coming. Why on earth are we testing the Hayabusa on a racetrack? I get you, but hear me out. The simple answer to the question is, a racetrack allows us to get to the limit of the motorcycle and the tire in the safe environment, something which is very hard to replicate and insanely dangerous when you're doing it on the road, which is why we are here on the racetrack. But having said that, after marring that dialogue, I still went out with the bike in the stock settings for a few laps, and already I realized that the bike is set up for the road. For us to accurately gauge what the tires are doing, we will have to set it up for the racetrack. We'll have to set up the sag for my weight. We'll have to set up the damping so that have a much better understanding about what the tires are doing. Yeah, that was much better. I actually got a chance to already review this bike, shot with these tires, the last time I was here on the last Indy Motor Track Day. My first initial impressions were not as great, especially in terms of the front end feel and the grip coming from the front tire, especially under braking. But then MRF called me a couple of weeks ago and they said that they had already incorporated a lot of the feedback which I had given them, and they invited me for this test to test out this new iteration of the tire. And for me, that's already a very good sign because MRF to react so quickly and already have a next iteration of the tire in such a short duration. Immediately when we first got out on the motorcycle, I know this is Chennai, it's already hot weather, so we can't accurately gauge how quickly the tires heat up. We'll have to wait till we ride this in Pune back at home on normal roads in probably wet conditions because it's raining there to get a more accurate idea about how quickly they heat up. But at least on the track, from the first lap on, I felt immediately comfortable on the bike. What they have done compared to the last iteration which I tried, which I was not very happy with, is they have played around with the tension of the wires inside the tire to give me a little more feel, a little more feedback. And that has most definitely helped because the feedback has most definitely improved. In fact, that has increased the footprint of the tire a little bit. And when I was braking really hard, felt a lot more stable. It was not skipping and sliding as much as the previous iteration was, which was a big deal. It's a problem which has not completely gone away. So when we were riding the Hayabusa, when the engine braking control was at its minimum setting, where we had very little engine braking happening, and you had to rely a lot more on the tires. Even though we had set up the suspension and I was going really hard on the brakes, I could feel still a little amount of skidding. But again, compared to the last iteration, it's a huge step. And when I then started riding the motorcycle with a little bit of help in terms of the engine braking, when we bumped it up, that problem did not really come up as much. And this is where I feel that considering that this is a single compound tire, they have scope for improvement there. Maybe a dual compound tire can help. I know what you're thinking, that anyways the center portion is going to be on the harder side, but that's what I feel like, considering that this is a front tire and the front tires compared to the rear tires don't really wear out as quickly. They have the option of going maybe a little bit softer to completely eradicate this problem and essentially have a tire which is even much better than Bridgestone when it comes to the grip that you have under really hard braking. You're thinking it's a racetrack, you're never really going to brake that hard. I disagree, because we are essentially replicating the scenario of you guys braking in emergency situations on the road, where you might not even have the same level of grip on the road that you're riding. So I think this gave us a really good insight into replicating that scenario and how the tires can be better. Another reason why I'm insisting on a dual compound tire is because on the edge, I feel the edge grip can be a little bit better. Again, it's not a question of how much you're going to lean the bike, how much you're going to push the bike on a racetrack. That's not what the bike is designed for. But more in line with when you're riding on normal roads which don't have the best amount of grip, and let's say you're riding in the sport mode, you're having a good ride and you suddenly encounter a road which has very less grip. The edge grip is what you need to ensure that there are no mishaps and the bike does not slip and slide. The tires already impressed me quite a bit, in the sense of I also progressed on as the sessions went on to also ride this with the traction control switched off. At a couple of places at the first touch, when the torque really kicks in, I could feel the rear tire moving quite a bit on the edge. Not as much as I'd anticipated, which was a welcome surprise. And a few places when I was really pushing the tire, almost on purpose to see the limit, it did kick me off a little bit. But the good part of that was I still felt that when it did ended up sliding way too much, it was still very progressive. I could still kind of anticipate and control the slide. So even though I had a few moments when I was a little bit off the motorcycle, I saw it coming, and that's already a very good sign. And I think having softer compound tire on the edge is only going to make the motorcycle and the tire that much better and that much safer. Everything in this world is a balance, right? So we made obviously a big step in terms of the feedback with this new iteration of the tire. But the downside of that is the fact that with the larger footprint, the motorcycle also has become heavier and more physically demanding in terms of steering. This is already a Hayabusa. It weighs an insane amount to start with, plus it has a really long wheelbase, so agility was never really its biggest point. It makes steering that much harder. So I think a rounder profile tire could also help a lot, because right now if you look at the tire profile, it's a little bit flatter. So I know this is going to be a very fine balance that MRF will have to do, because the Hayabusa is designed to go over 300 kilometers an hour. Yeah, so you want really good stability at that speed, which is why the profile is the way it is. But I feel like a slightly rounder profile will go a long way in helping with the agility of the motorcycle, kind of what we see on super bikes, which are almost like a Wii. So we don't have to go that extreme, but a more rounder shape will most definitely help with the agility of the motorcycle and make the physical effort required to ride this bike that much lesser. And the second reason why I'm insisting on that is because the profile of the tire as it is, if you can see at the back, we were already developing a step in terms of on the edge, just about 1 or 2 fingers from the edge, you could feel that's where I was getting on the gas, and there was a step which is developing. So already by the end of the second day, the tire was rendered not in the best condition to continue our testing because of the step which was developing, and that was because of the flatter profile of the tire. I think a more rounder profile will also help eliminate that problem. But to be brutally honest, I did not expect MRF to on their very first attempt. Okay, in this case, second attempt, because this is the second iteration of the tire which I'm testing. But I did not expect them to come this close to making such a good tire for a motorcycle like the Hayabusa. I mean, especially when we put it in the full power mode and reduce the traction control, I did have my heart in the mouth a little bit. Like, am I sure I want to do this? But the tire definitely had my back. Yes, it is far from perfect. There's still scope for improvement. But I think for what they have achieved in their very first attempt, when it comes to a hypo sport tire, especially for a machine like a Busa, is really impressive. And I really hope that they continue listening to this feedback and incorporating this feedback, because I feel they are very, very close to perhaps a tire when they incorporate all of this feedback and implement it, which is even possibly better than the Bridgestone S22s. And now I'm looking forward to do the next iteration or the next part of this review by taking the Busa in its natural environment on the road where most of us will be riding it. So really good first impressions, and I cannot wait to test it back at home to see how the tires do in the real world. And I'm not sure if I'll be riding it enough to verify the claim that this tire will last almost 10 to 15% more than the S22s. I don't think MRF is going to lend me the bike for that long, but at least in terms of the feedback, the feel, the grip, how it feels in real world condition, that is something which we can most definitely gauge. So looking forward to that test.